So today we're going to start and do something a little different. We've been working our way through the season of Lent in the Gospels of John, and before that even in a couple of other Gospels. So today we're going to jump off on a different sermon series, and we're going to look at some characters in the Bible and sort of their life and their relationships with God and things that they did and what we can learn from them. I mean, that's a part of life, right? Is to be able to look at others' lives and their choices and decisions and see how those turned out. Sometimes they turn out really positive and sometimes they turn out negative. And either way they go, they can be a learning experience from us. One of the greatest signs of wisdom is to be able to look at someone else that has made particularly poor decisions and go, you know what? I can avoid that one. Although it's hard, I don't know if you've raised kids or not, but we raised our kids and they're like, no, I just have to learn for myself. Like, I just have to put my hand on the hot stove to learn that it's hot, just for myself. I can't take your word for it. I'm like, well, that's just dumb. Like, but you want to go ahead and burn your hand, go right ahead. And it's not necessarily dumb. It's just lacking in wisdom. It's wise to look at others' lives and see what we can learn from them. And so we're going to take some character studies over the next few weeks. Probably not some characters you're really familiar with. It's easy to study about Jesus. It's easy to study about God, Philip, David, Noah, some of the big characters. But we're going to dive into some of the smaller, lesser known characters that we might be surprised what we could learn from them. And so in that spirit, let me see, anybody know who Thaddeus is? I got somebody in the back who thinks they know. Anybody, you sure? Is that you, Cheryl? What you got? One of the disciples, absolutely. Give Cheryl a round of applause. Absolutely. One of the disciples, absolutely. One of the disciples. Now, Thaddeus was one of what we call the 12 named disciples. In Jesus' time, people had people following around with him, and the group of people that followed him got called disciples just in a general sense. So there might have been hundreds and hundreds of people that were called disciples that sort of traveled with him in one region, but when he left, they stayed there or went for part of the time, but not others. And so they just were collectively kind of in the group. But there were 12 named disciples that Jesus individually called that we usually say the disciples. We refer to those 12. And Thaddeus is actually one of those 12. Now, for the story we're going to get to, Gospel of Mark, we're going to see where Jesus calls the disciples. We're going to go through the list, and we'll see how that goes. So in verse 13 down through 19 is what we're going to read this morning. And he, referring to Jesus, went up on the mountain and called to him those whom he desired. And they came to him. And he appointed the 12, also named the apostles, so that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to cast out demons. No pressure there, right? He appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he called Peter, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the names Boanerges, that is, sons of thunder. There was Andrew and Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, and James, the son of Alphaeus, and our guy Thaddeus, and Simon the Cananean, and Judas Iscariot, who would be the one to betray Jesus. So there you see what is really where Thaddeus is named as one of the disciples. Now here's a follow-up question for you. Tell me the coolest story that Thaddeus ever did, or the coolest thing Thaddeus ever said. Anybody got one? Anybody? What was the cool story he did, or the cool thing he said? Y'all read the Bible? That's a trick question. You might read your Bible cover, you're thinking, there isn't a story. You kind of think, well, wasn't he the one that cut off the ear of the soldier when they came to arrest? And you're like, no, that'd been Peter. Well, wasn't he the one that insulted Jesus' hometown and all that? No, that was Nathaniel. Well, wasn't he the one that argued about being great and who was going to be the greatest and all that? No, that was James. Wasn't he the one who walked on water? Even for just a second? No, that was Peter again. That was Peter. Wasn't he the one that had questions and doubted and needed to see Jesus for himself and was rewarded for his insight? No, that was Thomas. Well, wasn't he the one who took care of Jesus' mom when Jesus died at the end? No, that was John. Well, okay, surely he was the one who took care of Jesus' body after he was dead, went and buried it, and you're like, well, no, that was Philip. Okay, surely he was the one that when it came time for him to die for professing his faith and teaching about Jesus, and he was going to be crucified, and he said, I can't be crucified the same way Jesus was, so crucify me sideways and named a cross after. No, that was Andrew. Well, surely he was the guy, the wee little man up in a tree, right? Well, no, that was Zacchaeus. Like, what did Thaddeus, what cool story involves Thaddeus? What cool thing did Thaddeus say? And the short answer is nothing. There's no cool story that involves Thaddeus. There's no mention of him directly. There's not a cool thing he said. He just was there. He was just there. And so you think, well, what is it we're going to learn from a guy who traveled with Jesus for 3.5 years and didn't do anything significantly enough to be remembered by any of the 4 gospel writers? I mean, the 4 gospel writers wrote about all of Jesus' ministry, and Thaddeus didn't do anything to draw the attention from any of them at all. Paul didn't write about him. Peter didn't write about him. James didn't write about him. John didn't write about him. Matthew, Mark, Luke. What did Thaddeus actually do? And then what is it that we're going to learn from his life if none of us collectively can come up with a single thing he did that we actually would remember? Well, as a matter of fact, there are a few things we can learn from Thaddeus. And the first one is that we learn from Thaddeus that regardless of how insignificant you might feel, or regardless of how unnoticed you might go, God still does amazing things in and through your life. I mean, there are times where Thaddeus, sure, he goes through and he's just doing the thing and he's just doing what he's supposed to do. He's hanging out with the disciples and he passed out. Look, he was part of the feeding of the 5,000. I mean, he was one of the 12 taking all the food back and forth and handing out the things. He was there. He was there and saw Jesus walk on the water. He was there for all the stuff, but he didn't do anything that was significant enough to be noticed. He just was there. Oftentimes, you might feel that way in life. Well, nobody notices me. I don't have any significant characteristics. I don't have any tremendous qualities. I'm not really charismatic. I just kind of go through life and nobody really pays me much attention. Well, that's like Thaddeus. Just trucking through life, doing his own thing, but being used by God in a very special, significant way, even though you may not feel special or significant yourself or seem special or significant to other people. You see, part of what we learn in Thaddeus' life is that the world's definition of what is great, having power and influence and all that, isn't necessarily the way God judges power. And if we don't have the world's power, that doesn't disqualify us from being used by God in some significant way either. You see, as Thaddeus goes through, one of the things we also learn is that Thaddeus' greatness is found in his ability to be obedient. That's part of his greatness, is just being obedient, just being faithful, just showing up. And you think, showing up? I'm like, how big a deal is that? Well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever set a meeting with somebody, made a commitment with somebody, had somebody who was supposed to show up and do some work at a certain time, and they didn't show up? Have you ever had that happen? That's frustrating. Sometimes showing up is the hardest thing to actually do. And Thaddeus spends his 3 years being present, showing up, just being faithful, just being present. Regardless of whether he understood stuff, he's like the rest of the disciples. He didn't have any special insight. Jesus would teach about things, and they'd all sit there and go, what is he talking about? But he still stayed there. Jesus would do things, and he said, now you're going to go do them. And they're like, well, how are we going to do that? He still was there. He'd talk about the second coming Jesus would, and they'd all be like, what is he talking? He was still there with them. Without having all the answers, without having it all figured out, he was still faithful in his presence and his obedience. You see, the other thing we learn about Thaddeus too is that he served faithfully in anonymity. You see, he followed in the examples that Jesus talked all the time about being a faithful servant and having a humble heart that serves other people as you give God the credit for it. You see, that's part of what you see with Thaddeus. Thaddeus just does all the things. He did all the things. Did Thaddeus ever get any credit for it? Well, obviously not, because not any of us could come up with anything he'd ever done. He just was there doing what needed to be done, making sure everybody got served, and making sure God got all of the credit for it. You see, that's part of what's unique about Thaddeus, is that he didn't have anything that was significantly cool or amazing about him. You don't have any great qualities, any tremendous charisma. He wasn't outlandishly anything. He just was there. But when he did the things that he did, it made sure that the credit went where the credit was supposed to go, and that was to God. You see, it was in his ordinariness and in his normalness and even in some of his weaknesses that God's glory and strength shined out more than was Thaddeus. You see, that's the trap sometimes we fall into, that we have tremendous strengths and abilities, and we're good at this, and we're awesome at that, and we're accomplished, and we say, well, yeah, look what I got done. I mean, I know God was a part of it, but it really was me. I mean, God was just along for the ride. And we take the credit for the things that get done. Whereas we look at Thaddeus and Thaddeus made sure that, hey, he did what he did in a way that went really anonymous, that he didn't need credit, he didn't need recognition, he didn't need anybody to say, hey, good job. I mean, those are nice, but he didn't need that. What got done was done because he was serving others and making sure that God got the glory for it. I came across a story this week that was told as a true story. I'm going to change the name so you don't put anything together, but there was a small town with a couple of churches in it, and a couple of churches, over the course of time, there was First Memorial Church, great big church, had lots of things going on, lots of activity, lots of people, and then the River Community Church was there, and they were close together. It was a small town, and over the course of time, inadvertently, they had become rivals, particularly their youth groups. Now, it wasn't they were trying to say, hey, they're terrible, we're awesome, they don't worship God, we do. They're just become some competition. They competed in, softball leagues together, and they competed in, basketball leagues together, fundraising efforts, they competed to raise money. So there just was some competition, some rivalry that went on between the two groups. And River Community Church was gathered together with their youth and their high school kids one night, and they were doing a lesson about being servants and humble and all that kind of thing. And at the end of the lesson, the youth minister told his kids, he split them up into groups. He said, now look, for the last hour and a half, we're going to go out in the neighborhood, and we're just going to look for people to do things for just because things need to be done. We're going to look for ways to serve the people in our community. And as they were headed out, he said, now remember, make sure that you just do what you think Jesus would do. Let that guy, what do you think Jesus would do? That's what you guys go do. So they sent him out into the neighborhood. Well, one of the groups got together, and they went up and down the neighborhood, and they washed people's cars. And another group got together, and they went to the local gas station, and they pumped gas for everybody for free, did the windshields, cleaned them all up, just to be helpful. Another group went in the local nursing home and sang songs to the folks and prayed with them and just spent time hanging out with the folks in the nursing home. And as the groups got back together at the end of their time, they got back together in the group, and they were sharing, hey, here's what we did, and here's who we saw, and here's what it felt like, and here's what our experience was like. And one of the groups got together, and they said, hey, we went and we found an elderly woman that lives by herself right near First Memorial Church. And like just the mention of the name of the church, everybody's like, oh, not that church. But no, we just were helping her. She just happened to live by a church. Oh, okay. And so she went, we cut her grass. We raked up the leaves, we picked up sticks in the yard, we tended to some of the flower beds, and when we got done, she insisted that we come inside so that she could give us some lemonade and pray with us. So the kids telling the story, so we all go in the house, have a sip of lemonade, the woman prays for us, and then the woman says, she goes, you kids, you boys and girls from First Memorial Church, you always do the nicest things. Y'all are such a great blessing to our community. And the youth minister goes, what? She thought you were from First Memorial Church. Well, did you correct her and tell her you weren't from First Memorial, you were actually from River Community Church? And the kid telling the story says, well, no, we didn't say anything. He said, well, wait a minute, you mean so she thinks you went to that church? You didn't correct her, make sure she knew which church you went to? Why didn't you say anything? And the youth looked back at the youth minister and said, well, you told us when we left to go do what we thought Jesus would do. And we just thought Jesus would keep his mouth shut. Because at the end of the day, what needed to get done got done. The person was served, and God got the credit for it. They didn't need the glory themselves. They didn't need the recognition. They just did what needed to be done. You see, that's Thaddeus for us. Thaddeus lives the life, and he spent his time doing what needed to be done. He was there faithfully following Jesus, helping in all the things he helped in, did all the things that he did, but he did it in such a way that he didn't need the credit or need the recognition and didn't need the attaboy. He just did what needed to be done because he lived his life with the heart of a servant. And at the heart of a servant is a humble, faithful follower of Jesus. May each of us, whatever gifts, talents God's given us, whatever things God puts on our heart to do, may we live like Thaddeus and just be faithful in our obedience and look for ways to serve and do the things that need to be done simply because they need to be done. And that we bless those who we do them for, and we allow God to get the credit. Amen.